Hi, 5th grade. Welcome to lesson 10-5, subtracting mixed numbers. Your learning goal for tonight is to use equivalent fractions as a strategy to subtract mixed numbers. Two learning goals that I want you to write into your journal are subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, including mixed numbers, by replacing given factors with equivalent fractions. Your second one is to rename the minuend to get a fraction large enough to allow subtraction of the fraction in the subtrahend. Take a minute and write those goals in your journal. Pause the video, and when you're ready, please restart it. All right, let's look at those vocabulary terms that might sound a little bit unfamiliar to you. The first one is minuend. It is the first number in a subtraction problem. The second word is subtrahend. The subtrahend is the second number in a subtraction problem, or the number that is being subtracted. So that when you have your subtraction problem, it looks like this: minuend minus subtrahend equals difference. So they're not words you've not used before. They just might not sound quite as familiar to you. Take a minute, pause the video, and write those into your journal. And when you're ready, please start the video again. All right, let's get started. This lesson is subtracting mixed numbers. The difference in this is that when you're subtracting these mixed numbers, you're going to have to borrow from your whole number and add to your numerator in your first fraction in order to complete the subtraction problem. So in 4 2/3 minus 2 3/4, we have to borrow from the whole number 4 in order to complete the problem. So this one is already written out for you. I'm just going to review the steps with you in this, and then we'll do a subtraction problem together. So the first thing you have to do is to find the LCM and fix the denominator. So between 3 and 4, our LCM, or lowest common multiple, is 12. So 3 times 4 is 12, so you multiplied here to make this 8. 4 times 3 is 12, you multiplied 3 by 3 to get 9. We have fixed that. Then you have to borrow one whole from the minuend. So you take from the 4, you make this a 3. You add that whole number here. So you see 3 plus 1 is 4. The next step then, because you borrowed this whole number, that you add the value of the denominator to the numerator. So your denominator is 12. So you add that value. That's where this whole comes in, because one whole in a fraction is equal to 12 twelfths. That equals one whole, because 12 divides into 12 one whole time. So you add that 12 to the 8, which gives you 20 twelfths. So 3 and 20 twelfths is the same as 3 plus 1 and 8 twelfths. So then you can now subtract 3 and 20 twelfths minus 2 and 9 twelfths to come up with your final answer. So those are the steps. Now I'll do a problem with you, and we'll see how well you understand it. All right, here's our first example. I want you to work this with me. 3 3/4 minus 1 and 7/8. First thing we have to do is find our LCM between 4 and 8. We've done enough of these problems to know that in order to find your LCM, you list your factors, or your multiples. 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8. We can stop right there because we know that 8 is our common denominator. It's our LCM. So the first thing we have to do is fix this 4. So what did it take for 4 to equal 8? Times 1 times 2 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8, so 3 times 2 is 6. So our new problem is 3 6/8 minus 1 7/8. Well, because you can't subtract 7 from 6 because 6 is too small, you have to borrow from the 3. So we borrow 1 from the 3, and our new problem becomes 2. And this is where we're going to borrow one whole. When we borrow that one whole from the 2, we are borrowing the one whole equals the same amount as the denominator. You add the value of the denominator to your numerator. So your denominator stays the same. But because you borrowed one whole, whatever the denominator is, you add that to your numerator. So you're going to add 8 to the 6, and your new numerator becomes 14. Over here, let me show you why. So when you have 2 and 14/8, you know that this means to divide. And you know that 8 can divide into 14 one whole time. you add that 1 whole to the 2, that would equal 3. When you take 8 out of 14, because 14 minus 8 is 6, whatever you have left over becomes your numerator, your denominator stays the same. So you can see that 2 and 14/8 is equivalent to 3 and 6/8, which is this. So here you have your new fraction, 2 and 14/8 minus 1 and 7/8. Now that you have a fraction that you can subtract, you now subtract. You can subtract your two whole numbers. 2 minus 1 is 1. Remember, our denominators stay the same. You don't subtract. So that's an 8. And 14 minus 7 is 7. So we are borrowing from our whole number. You add the value of your denominator to your numerator, and then you're ready to subtract. All right, let's see if you guys can do one. Here's your first problem. 8 and 3/7 minus 3 and 5/6. Pause the video and try it on your own. First step, find your LCM so you can fix your denominators. Then you're going to have to borrow. Then you can subtract. Pause the video, try it, and then we'll do it together. All right, let's see how you did. First off, we first need to find our common denominator between 7 and 6. If you find your multiples of 7 and 6, you're going to find out that 42 was your common denominator. So, fix your denominators. That's going to be 42. This will be 42. 7 times what was 42? It is 6. So if you multiply the 6 on the bottom, you multiply it on top. So 6 times 3 is 18. 6 times 7 is 42. If you multiply it on the bottom, you have to multiply it on top. So your new numerator over here, 7 times 5 is 35. So your new problem is 8 and 18/42 minus 3 and 35/42. You cannot subtract 35 from 18, so you're going to have to borrow. Remember, when we borrow 1 whole. So you take 1 away from the 8. This now becomes 7. When you borrow that whole, you borrow the value of the denominator. So we have to add 42 to 18. 42 plus 18 is going to be 60. So now you have 7 and 60/42 plus, let's minus, and the second fraction does not change, minus 3 and 35/42. Now you can subtract. 7 minus 3 is going to be 4. Your denominator stays the same, and 60 minus 35 is 25. So 4 and 25/42 is your answer. Let's try another one. All right, pause the video, try this on your own. When you restart it, we'll see what we can do together. All right, let's see what you got. First things first, common denominator. Between 5 and 2, your common denominator is going to be 10. 5 times what is 10? It's 2. When you multiply 2 by 2, you get 4. So your new fraction is 7 and 4/10 minus 2 times what is 10? It's 5. If you multiply 5 on top, you get 5/10. So 7 and 4/10 minus 1 and 5/10. Again, you cannot subtract a larger from a smaller number, so you have to borrow. We're going to take 1 away from the 7. That makes it a 6. Borrow the whole. You always add the value of the denominator, so we're going to add 10 to the 4. And now you have 6 and 14/10 minus 1 and 5/10. Subtract your whole numbers. 6 minus 1 is 5. Denominator stays the same. And 14 minus 5 is 9. And your final answer is 5 and 9/10. Let's do one more practice problem together. 8 and 3/10 minus 1 and 2/5. Pause the video. Try it on your own. Let's see if you can do it this time, and then we'll do it together. All right, first step, least common multiple, which is your common denominator. Between 5 and 10, what's your common denominator? 10. Nicely done. This one's already 10, so you don't have to change it. 5 times 2 is 10. Multiply by 2 here. So your new numerator is 4. So your new problem is 8 3/10 minus 1 4/10. You cannot subtract 4 from 3, so again, we borrow from the 8. So your 8 becomes a 7. You always borrow the value of the denominator, so we're going to add 10 to the 3. 10 plus 3 is 13. Denominator stays the same. The value of your second fraction doesn't change, so we'll simply bring over the 1 4/10, and we're ready to subtract. So 7 minus 1, subtract your whole numbers first. You'll get 6. Your denominator stays the same again, so you'll have 10, and 13 minus 4 is 9. And your final answer is 6 9/10. Hopefully this is getting a little bit easier. When we do more practice in class tomorrow, it'll become a little bit easier then too. All right, let's look at your practice word problem. The average weight of a basketball is 21 1/10 ounces. The average weight of a baseball is 5 1/4 ounces. How many more ounces does the basketball weigh? Try the subtraction problem on your own. Pause the video, and when you're ready, start it again, and we'll see what we did together if we got it right. All right, how'd you do? You should have written down 21 1/10 minus 5 1/4. First things first, what did you do to figure out a common denominator? Some of you might have come up with 40 as a common denominator, but it has a smaller one too. You could have figured out that 20 was the common denominator. So then your problem would have been 20. 10 times what is 20? 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. So you have 21 2/20 minus, you're going to multiply 5 here to get 20. So this is 5 5/20. All right, so we're ready to borrow. So you need to borrow from the 21. So the 21 then becomes 20. Remember, we borrow the value of the denominator, so we'll add 20 to the 2. So this now becomes 20 22/20 minus 5 5/20. Once you subtract those, subtract your whole numbers. 20 minus 5 will be 15. Denominator stays the same. And 22 minus 5 is 17. So, and I just lost my page. Hold on 1 second. This hasn't messed up like this before. There we go. All I was trying to do was draw a square. Okay, so 15 17/20. Got a little messed up on my video. All right, and that's your answer. So if you were writing the answer down, you would say the basketball weighs 15 17/20 more ounces than the baseball. Sorry about that mess up. All right, now let's look at our challenge problem. Jenna bought a spool of ribbon for her craft projects. It contained 5 3/4 meters of ribbon. She used 3 2/5 meters of ribbon for a school project. How many meters of ribbon does Jenna have left? She needs 2 1/4 meters for a birthday project. Will she have enough ribbon left for the birthday project? So this is a multi-step problem. You have to do a few different things in order to answer all the parts of this question. Take the time and do this tonight, and then we'll check your problems in class tomorrow. All right, let's finish this up tonight. Review your learning goals. Do you have them all written in your journal? Do you have the practice problems written in your journal? The word problem answer written in your journal, and the answer to your challenge problem that we'll check in class tomorrow. All right, hopefully you've done well. We've completed lesson 10-5. Have a great evening, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Good night.